Hello everybody. I am here to show you how to get started doing homework 1 using Stata for PSQF6242. So here is our course website that has the links to everything that we need. Step 1 is to make sure that your VPN is running in the background. And I just learned a quicker way to connect to this than what I had been doing. It will have your username saved if you've used this before. You will need to re-enter your Iowa password. And in earlier videos, I had you type SMS to generate a text message to your phone that has a bunch of codes that you can then enter to do your two-factor authentication. I recently learned that if you have this enabled, you can also type the word push, P-U-S-H, and it will directly send a notification that you can approve, bypassing the process of entering the numeric codes. So I'm doing that now. VPN is now running, hooray. We can go to the virtual desktop. It reminds me that I need a VPN. It remembers me. And here we go. So I'm going to get Stata started. And while that is going, I'm going to get into the homework portal for this class. And you will enter your last name and your Iowa ID 8-digit number. I am going to use a different login for demonstration purposes. So this one, come back here. Thank you, Stata. There we go. So you should have homework 1 available to you. I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And Stata, in the meantime, has opened up for us. Hooray. We will also need to have open the Windows Explorer tab. And so note that when I reconnected my VPN, my H drive automatically mapped to my local machine. You may need to do that separately. And I have created a subfolder called Homework 1 that we're going to download files and save them to complete this homework. So let me go back. There's the version of the Windows Explorer inside the virtual desktop. So we will be using that. Okay, inside Homework 1, it tells you the total points, how many points are from each section of the homework, as well as the due date. To get started, you will need to download your files. One of them is going to be your homework file. So if you click on this link, it will pop up a file and you will need to navigate to where you want to store it. So for instance, if I'm in my H drive, I have my homework 1. I did a demo earlier using a different data set, but now I'm going to add this one. I am not going to change the name of it. Just hit save. Also, you will have links to starter syntax in either SAS or Stata. Since I'm demoing Stata today, I'm going to click on that link and it opens up some text on a different page. What I want you to do with this text is to highlight all of it. So Control A to copy. We're going to Control A to select all. We're going to copy it and we're going to go into Stata and we're going to start a new log file. And how do I do that is always the question. This is a new do file. We're not going to have the new log file. I want to have a new one. It's one of these tiny little icons in here. I always struggle to remember where it is. There it is. It looks like a sheet of paper with lines on it. New do file editor. I'm going to click that and paste the text that I copied over from the homework portal. So this is designed to help you with the process of importing your data and labeling the information in it. So the things that you need to change, where your data are located. So this needs to be changed to the folder that you saved your homework data to. So I am going to use the Windows Explorer inside the virtual desktop, navigate to the H drive, navigate to homework 1, put my cursor up in the address bar and copy. And now I can paste that information inside the quotes. There we go. So now it understands where on my machine to look for this file, which folder. The name of the file to be imported is going to be given right here. So note that it uses the file save as the first part of it, and I need to change this 8-digit number to be the one that is consistent with the ID I am using. So you would put in your 8-digit Iowa ID. I'm going to change this one to the login that I'm using right now, person number 2, and we're going to highlight just that much. Actually, before we run it, let's go ahead and save our work. So it wants to save it as a new do file. I would recommend putting it in the same place as your homework to avoid confusion. So I'm going to call this homework 1 syntax. There. Now I'm going to highlight lines 1 through 11 and go up and hit the little running icon. Go to the Stata window, and lo and behold, everything has been imported. So note that if you use the code that I have written, what we just executed, when you import the Excel dataset, it's using an option called Case Preserve that's going to keep the case of the variable names exactly as I type them in the Excel sheet. So you can see that here in Stata that I use a combination of uppercase and lowercase letters. So that means that when you type these variable names, you need to type them exactly as I did. Otherwise, Stata will not recognize them. The next pieces of code are creating and applying value labels for categorical variables, as well as variable labels for all of them. So you don't need to change anything. Label define is creating a labeling system that will be used for 2 different variables in our data set. One is for first generation college status, and another is for gender identity. If you highlight those lines and the lines below it, that creates the labeling system and applies each of those labeling systems to their corresponding variables in the data set. So I'm just going to highlight them, run them, check my other window to make sure nothing is angry with me. Hooray, hooray. Same thing here. These are simply labels that I have written so that you better know what your variables mean. The names of the variables are right here. The labels that go with them are in the red text inside the quotes. So it's helpful to have these names to refer to when you're doing your homework. That way you know exactly what the column is that you're going to be using. So I'm just going to highlight and run, check to make sure that it works. So just to recap, the only things that you need to change in this starter code that I've created for you from the Homework One portal is the address for file save, and that should be the folder that your homework data file has been saved to, and then the 8-digit ID that goes with your account. Those are the only things that you should need to change, and once you have changed those 2 things, you can run up through line 18, and note that there's actually 28, excuse me, and it says the homework 1 is now ready to use. The other 2 commands in here I have created to help you save your results when you're all done. You don't need to do that until you've hit that point. So I want to focus on your code goes here. This is where you would want to refer to the corresponding lecture and example that goes with each homework. Because this is homework 1, we're going to use the codes given in example 1. And that code and output was featured in the lecture, but I also gave you the original files so that you can copy them over and not have to type so much. So to know what you need to do, we first have to know what the questions are that we need to answer. So let's go back to the homework and look at the content. So the background is that this is supposed to be a study of graduate student life, and we are simply getting descriptive information for a series of variables that we would put into a method section. The instructions will give you a generic description of the study as well as any specific instructions pertaining to how you treat the variables. Note that it also gives you the level of precision that you need to enter the answers in order for them to be correct. So here it's 2 digits after the decimal need to be reported. So the first question here under section 1, enter the total number of graduate students. Well, I can tell you that any procedure that you run is going to have that as part of it. So let's skip that for right now and look at the next question that is more specific. Enter the number of first generation graduate students. Okay, so I need to know what the name of the variable is that contains that information. Let me go back to my syntax file. The variables that we could possibly need are all listed right here. And the one that corresponds to first generation status is right here, and it's called first gen. So that is what I need. I'm going to copy that down here so that I don't lose it. Now, what do I do with it? Well, I need to find the command that would give me frequencies and percentages for each level of the variable. I need to find the codes that were part of example 1 so that I can do this homework 1. Now I have already saved those codes elsewhere, and so I'm going to go navigate to those so that I can open them up and refer to them. So those are inside the H drive. I had saved the example 1 files here, so I'm going to open up the do file that went with example 1. So this file starts in a similar way to your homework starter. It helps you import the data and add labeling information. So we don't need any of this because I have already done that for you inside this homework starter syntax. What we want to focus on are the analyses, the codes that go with generating univariate statistics in part 1, and then part 2 will be tests of means. So I'm going to go ahead and copy all of this code down here, and I'm going to put it over here under your code goes here. So if I were to take this code and just try to run it, let me show you what happens when I do that. I go back to Stata, and it gives me angry red text that says marital is not found. Well, that's because the variable called marital was a part of the data set in example 1. Marital is not a variable in our current data set, and so it tells you I can't find it. So this is to say that the examples that I'm going to give you, so example 1 goes with homework 1, example 2 goes with homework 2, and so forth, you will need to determine how to manipulate to make them do the task that is necessary in your homework. So in this case, what I'm trying to do is find the number of students who identify as first generation and the proportion of the total that that number implies. So tabulate is how we get information for categorical variables about the counts and the percentages for each possible value. So I need to take my first generation variable that I found earlier and replace marital with that. And I'm also simultaneously going to be changing the name of the label that I'm putting up here on the output so that I don't confuse myself by talking about marital when that has nothing to do with homework 1. So I'm going to paste that in there as well. Now I can try to highlight this, hit run. It tells me Stata needs attention. Much like my 5-year-old, Stata needs attention. It's the analog of, hey, mommy, watch this. That's what Stata is trying to tell you. So it's actually telling you that we have output. So now we have the frequency and the percent that goes with each category of this variable. The first category is someone who's not first generation. The second category is someone who is first generation. If I go back to my questions, I need the number of first generation. So if I look at my output, that number is 144. So I'm going to go in here, hit enter. Uh-oh, I typed it in the wrong box. So it's telling me, no, that is not correct because I entered it into the box that has the total, not the number that's first generation. So let's try that again. Number of first generation graduate students. Did I pick the wrong number? Yes, I did. I picked the first number and not the second. So I'm inadvertently demonstrating how this process of doing homework will help you find the right answer. Apparently, I need some more caffeine. But yes, number two is first generation. So I should not be looking at the 144 because that's not first generation. I want the number that goes with is first generation, which is 52. So let's try this again. Hallelujah. There we go. The proportion of first generation students is also given in the same output. Let me try to make sure that we can see this window a little better. It's 26.53%. Now, I can't enter that as 26.53%. What I need to do is enter it at 0.2653 because it's proportion out of 1. That is going to be graded as correct. And there we go. And with respect to the total number of students, it tells me that my total is 196. So I can go ahead and type that up here. And there we go. So as you're working through this, you'll be doing multiple instances of each type of command. Rather than replacing the codes as you go, I would make a copy. So for instance, I have answered questions 1 through 3 with this. So I'm going to make a note to myself here that I've got question 1 through 3, with the codes below. The next questions refer to what looks to be gender identity, males, females, and non-binary. Let me find what that variable is called. That variable is gender ID. So I'm going to make a copy, paste this down here, and I'm going to get gender ID as the name of the column that I'm interested in and put that here, and note that this process is going to allow me to answer questions 4 through question 10. Questions 4 through 10, for instance. So I would encourage you to leave yourself whatever trail of breadcrumbs would be helpful in reminding yourself what you're looking at and why. So you will not need any graphs within this homework, I can tell you that. So I'm going to get rid of that part of the example code. The other things that you will need is summarize, which is for quantitative variables, and this is a histogram, so we won't need that. So you should be able to use this, changing the variable names, to get many of the answers for the rest of section 1. And once you're done answering these questions with numbers, you'll be able to complete the results. And so each of these bold values is an answer that you have already given up above. So it's going to pre-populate those values with whatever you've entered, whether it's right or wrong. So whatever you've entered is what it will use down here. And then you simply have to answer the questions. So for instance, it's saying that the survey was returned by 196 graduate students. Okay, what's the letter that goes along with sample size? You'll need to select the correct response and do the same thing for each of the choices in here. So note the questions that I have not answered yet are all, the values are all still 0. So then you'll go through and answer a couple multiple choice questions after that. Section 2 is asking about hypothesis tests regarding sample means, and these are for quantitative variables. So I'm going to go back to example 1 syntax, and I also have templates that you can borrow for that. So within example 1, we tested sample means for both quantitative variables as well as for binary variables. In homework 1, I'm only asking you to practice testing means for quantitative variables, so we should only need this command. I'm going to copy that, put that in my list of examples that I can then modify. Stop it. There we go. So just to review, the corresponding example that goes with the homework will give you templates of how to do various things. I will not ask you to do anything that I haven't given you an explicit example for. Your task is to find which procedure corresponds to the task I'm asking you to do, and then to borrow that code and modify it so that it corresponds to the particular variables that are that are the variables of focus for that homework. Once you are all the way done, then if you run the code that corresponds to this log file, so lines 31 in this instance all the way through log close, what will happen is the same place that you pointed file save to, where you've been saving your syntax and the data sets, there will be a plain text file saved there as well that has your results. Now, this step of saving output is completely optional. You don't need to do that, but some people feel better when they have the output with them. The only thing that you really need to save is this file that you've been doing your work in, the syntax file. Save it often, because if you lose connection to the internet, you may not be able to save your work. If you're ever in that situation where you can't save, you can always copy the text and paste it into a document outside the virtual machine just so that you don't lose your work. But please make sure you're saving this file. If you have saved your work inside the syntax file in Stata, and you have the original data set in Excel format that you imported, that's all you need to perfectly recreate whatever results you have found. So once you're done with the homework, you've answered all of the questions to the best of your ability. Make sure that you are hitting check and save if you want to pause your homework and come back and finish it later. But once you're all the way done, the very last step to hit submit final answers, you will then have to re-enter your 8-digit Iowa ID just to make sure that you fully intend to submit and it wasn't by accident. So there you go. Hopefully this will help get you started. Please let me know if you have any questions or problems working with the system. And if you get stuck, if you try to answer a question and it just won't turn green, please shoot me an email. Explain which question you're on and what you think the answer is, and I can try to help you troubleshoot either your logic or the code that you're using to get the answer. I'm happy to try and help however I can. All right, I hope you have fun. Good luck to you.